everyone, and welcome back to the F2 show by Inside F2, a surprise F2 show, not one we usually do. We don't usually do an F2 show before the weekend, but there has been so many driver announcements over the last couple of days that we thought we'd sit down, weren't we, Aaron Harper, to have a chat about all of the changes that we've got going into this weekend. We've got a few things to discuss, but let's start with Ollie Bearman. He's stepping into the Haas in Formula One. He's replacing Kevin Magnussen, who obviously is banned from Formula One this weekend. We won't talk about the reasons for that and talk about that. But yeah, great opportunity for Ollie Bearman, right?
Yeah, it is. And there's something about Ferrari and their drivers and their signing of drivers into Formula One teams that's triggering chain reactions in motorsport in terms of driver transfers. It's happened with Lewis Hamilton, obviously, and now Ollie Bearman triggering this whole sort of chain reaction, it seems, in Formula 2. But I wish Ollie all the best. He's already shown what he can do in a Formula One car, in a Ferrari. So I'm sure he'll be absolutely fine. He's got a double win under his belt at Baku from last year. Took pole position with a bent steering rack. I mean, of all the places to have bent steering, Baku's probably the lowest on the calendar in a Formula 2 car, because obviously they don't go to Singapore. You might argue maybe Monaco, but the high speeds they do around the streets of Baku is probably quite frightening, to be honest. But he will do pretty well. If the car's able to score points, expect him to be in and around the top 10, sniffing for that final points paying position. If he can get within about 0.3 of Hulkenberg in qualifying, I think that's a really, really good effort.
Completely agree. I think the Haas mechanics will be getting a hammer out and bashing the steering rack, bending it a little bit for this weekend to make sure he's got that bent steering wheel that he went so well at last year, right, in Formula 2. Picks up the double that weekend as well. So, yeah, give best of luck to Ollie Bearman this weekend. That does, of course, mean he's not going to be racing for Premier in Formula 2 this weekend. And we've heard that Gabriele Mini, he's been announced as the driver who will be replacing Ollie Bearman at Premier this weekend. Would you say he's the logical choice, Aaron? Is that fair to say? He's the highest ranked driver for Prema in the Formula 3 season this season. No more Formula 3. That season is done. Made sense for him to step up?
Yeah, it's a fair reward. He's done the best job out of the three Prema drivers in F3 this year. So, he's kind of earned that opportunity now that it's opened up for him. And he's not, incapable. He's shown he's very, very capable. And if Prema deliver a car, we could see Mini do a really good job, and then that throws the cat amongst the pigeons as to what they do next season. Although, considering he's already with Prema and they're losing both of their F2 drivers this year, they will logically, you'd think, put Mini in the car for next year alongside potentially Arvid Lindblad, or somebody else will pick up that Prema seat. So it's a great audition for Gabriele as well to sort of show what he can do in this new generation of F2 car.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing Gabriele Mini in Formula 2 this weekend. As you say, it's almost a mini audition, isn't it? So, and I actually think, I think he'll be, on the pace straight away, actually. I think he'll qualify in the top 10, and I think he'll score points this weekend. I think Gabriele Mini is a very talented driver. Great couple of years in Formula 3, and I don't think he'll have any problems at all getting up to speed in Formula 2. So we'll see how he does this weekend. Moving on, we've also got Christian Mansell, who's been announced as a Trident driver for this weekend, replacing Roman Stanek. We knew that Roman Stanek was only on a deal until the end of Monza. Perhaps with a view to the Formula 3 season finishing and a driver with more money, maybe a bigger budget coming in at Trident to fund that. We know Richard Verschoor, the other Trident driver, is sometimes lacks funds. So, were you surprised to see that, Aaron, or do you think that was, expected, if you like?
I wouldn't say it was expected, but it also wasn't a surprise. I am disappointed for Roman Stanek because he has had some occasions where he's punched above his weight in terms of his perceived ability behind the wheel of a Grand Prix car and the level that Trident generally tends to be racing at. I think back to, obviously, Australia, where he was crowned the winner of the sprint race after a fantastic defensive effort. Obviously, he finished second on the road that day, and it was Isaac Hadjar who was disqualified from the lead, or from the victory on that afternoon. But yeah, it's not a surprise because we know he comes with funding, and a lot of F2 seats are dependent on funding, and if that funding dries up, then your seat is at risk. And then, this is where the power tends to be with the drivers who are backed by the Formula One team. So Bearman and Antonelli, they're kind of the prime examples of a Formula One team looking after them and saying, "You're in." And look, Antonelli made that jump from Freca to F3, to F2, sorry, skipping F3. So he had a guaranteed seat, essentially. Other drivers, not so fortunate, have to work a lot harder for their budget. You mentioned Richard Verschoor. He has to work really hard. And obviously, the king of crowdfunding, Ralph Boschung, constantly getting those sponsors in and getting himself a seat on the grid. But he's obviously moved on to pastures new. So, if you run out of funding, your seat is at risk. And sadly, that has meant that Roman Stanek is no longer in the Formula 2 grid.
Yeah, shame for Roman Stanek. I think obviously his Formula 2 highlight will very much be that win in Melbourne earlier on this season. I have to say I wasn't surprised at Christian Mansell jumping in at Trident, just purely because he tested for Trident at the end of last season at Abu Dhabi. He obviously... Christian, he's a very good driver, so I'm not going to sit here and say he's a pay driver, absolutely not, but he does clearly come with a bit of budget. He jumped in the Formula 2 test at the end of last season with Trident. They've already got that relationship from that point. The fact that Roman Stanek was on a deal until the end of round 11 at Monza, I kind of did expect someone else to jump in, and I did kind of think that Christian Mansell could potentially be that driver, given he did test for them at the end of last season. So let's see how Christian Mansell does over the next couple of 3 rounds. 3 rounds, he gets Baku, Qatar and Abu Dhabi to round out the season, and then potentially a view to a full-time seat next season. So let's see what Christian Mansell does. Zach O'Sullivan, also, he has announced personally that he's not going to be able to complete the season on his social media channels. At the time of recording right now, and this will probably change by the time this video goes out, Aaron, as it usually does, their ART have not announced a replacement for him at ART. And I think this has caught ART out a little bit. If I'm looking at this, Zach O'Sullivan made the announcement on his personal social media. ART haven't made an announcement. ART haven't announced another driver. Formula 2 haven't announced a driver change. It all seems a little bit odd. And I think this is potentially that one of his sponsors has pulled out last minute. It doesn't really make any sense. ART didn't have a driver ready to go. So I think this has caught them out a little bit. I think one of his sponsors potentially dropped out. And by him putting it on social media, potentially he can get a sponsor in to replace the sponsor that he may have lost. I don't know this for fact. I'm just speculating. Potentially get a sponsor so that he can still race this weekend. Because as I said, ART, as of the time of recording, haven't announced a replacement. Thoughts on that, Aaron? Did it surprise you? If he isn't to race this weekend, it would be a real disappointment for him. A 2-time race winner this season.
This one very much did surprise me because, first of all, he's a Williams-backed driver, and I've just given that whole spiel about Formula One backed drivers having almost a guaranteed seat. Zach O'Sullivan here looks like pulling out of the Formula 2 season because of a lack of funding, but yet he's backed by Williams. So surely they could step in and secure the bag for him, to coin a phrase. But it's a bizarre situation, like you say, because it's only coming from Zach, and there's nothing from ART, nothing from Formula 2, nothing from Williams either. So maybe they're expecting something. Maybe they're going to step in last minute so he can fulfill that seat. But it is a real shock, and it's really disappointing because he's had a decent season, quietly going under the radar, and then he's the sort of driver who gets himself settled in season 1. Season 2 has a better campaign. I won't say a title push because obviously he was quite distant second in Formula 3 to Gabriel Bortoleto last year, but his closest contender won races, and he's done the same in Formula 2. But yeah, it's disappointing. And also from a British motorsport fan's point of view, it's a British driver lost. Yes, there's British bias, but I want to see British drivers doing well. I want to see all the drivers do well, obviously. But when they're British, it means a little bit more to me. So it's a shame from a lot of perspectives, and like you say, it leaves a real sort of quandary as to actually what's going to happen. who fills that seat? I mean, the Formula 3 Championship has finished. Maybe Leonardo Fornaroli gets an early taste of F2. But, ART still need to make that decision.
Yeah, and this is something that, again, makes me think that ART were not expecting this, is that surely the logical person to jump in that seat would have been Christian Mansell, their Formula 3 driver who finished highest in the championship. It would have made sense for Christian Mansell to be the one to step in and replace Zach O'Sullivan at ART. But he's going to Trident. We already know that from the announcement earlier on in the week. So it does make me think that ART were not expecting this announcement. The fact that Christian Mansell is off to Trident to go and drive for them for the next 3 rounds. And ART don't seem to have a replacement lined up. Fornaroli, I think, is a good shout. Do they want an established pair of hands in Formula 2? Can they tempt Jack Doohan, for example, to drive? I don't think they will. I'm just throwing it out there. Could Arthur Leclerc be a good option last season? Obviously, an experienced pair of hands, completed the season last year with Downs. Could he be an option? Or could it be a Formula 3 driver stepping up? Could Leo Fornaroli be a driver who could step up? Could they go with Arvid Lindblad? I don't know. I don't know the answer, and I don't think ART know the answer. Otherwise, they would have announced a driver, right? So if I had to put my money on it, I still do think that Zach O'Sullivan will complete the season, and I think he'll be driving this weekend. Let's wait and see, because as I said, I'm sure the announcement will already be announced by the time this podcast goes out in typical Inside F2 fashion. Aaron, I just wanted to touch as well. Obviously, we've seen the announcement that Leo Fornaroli will be driving in Formula 2 next season for sure. He'll be driving for Virtuosi. A great Formula 3 season, and a spectacular end to the Formula 3 season. That move on the last lap of the race. What can we expect from him next year? Are you excited to see him in Formula 2 full time next season?
It's always exciting to see drivers stepping up a level to see if they can adapt and take their form, especially when they're a champion, into a new series. We've seen it with Gabriel Bortoleto this year, and in parts with Kimi Antonelli making the step up from Freca. So be interesting to see in the same machinery, with the same team as Gabriel Bortoleto, how Fornaroli does, because I think, especially if Bortoleto goes on to win this year's F2 title and doesn't return, it's, he takes that position. Can he do something similar? If Bortoleto doesn't win the title, I'm sure he returns to Formula 2 next year. He's got the perfect yardstick. He's got the bloke who won Formula 3 before him as his teammate in Formula 2 and who went on a title charge. And then in that situation, missing out to somebody else, probably Isaac Hadjar. But it would be an excellent barometer of actually where he is and how much progress he's making. And he'd have so much opportunity to tap into that data bank of Gabriel Bortoleto and improve as well. And Invicta have shown that they can nail this generation of Formula 2 car and get it to the front most weekends. It's what we expected of Prema and ART. And they've been the ones who've done the business fairly regularly.
Yeah, 100%. I'm not convinced Bortoleto will be back in Formula 2 next season, even if he doesn't win the championship and he does finish P2. But let's wait and see. It's almost as if we need to do a podcast predicting our 2025 team or who's driving where in 2025, Aaron. Maybe that's something we can do in the gap between Baku and Qatar. But yeah, that's all from us. Obviously, a very short podcast. Just, wanted to highlight the fact that we've got 3 drivers or driver replacements potentially taking place for this weekend, in addition to the 2 new drivers we saw last weekend in Monza as well. You can keep up to date with all of the action this weekend on Inside F2, on our social media channels at Inside F2, on our Discord channel as well. Make sure you join that and get involved in the conversation on Discord. We'll be back for the Baku review, Eva. We did the Monza review last week. We'll be back for the Baku review next week, next Monday or Tuesday, to review all of the action from the Formula 2 weekend in Baku. But from all of us here at Inside F2, we'll see you next time.